Welcome to Unveil the Practice, a hodgepodge of goodness, a podcast where I discuss health, lifestyle, and creative pursuits. Hello, dear friends, and today I have another wonderful guest for you, my very good friend and fellow writer, Edith Kimbell. She is also the wife of Michael Kimbell, who was my guest last time. Welcome, Edith. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Well, first, I would love if you could introduce yourself. You have such a fascinating story and background, and I think it's very unique. I think everybody would enjoy listening to it.
I'm from Austria, and I was born 8 days after the end of World War II in the ancestral village of my mother's family, although I count myself Viennese. Mm-hmm. When I was 5, my family moved to India for my father's work, and that is where I got most of my school education at an English boarding school for expatriates. At age 15 and a half, I moved back to Austria, where I then started my college education, and at age 19, we moved to Canada, and from there I, on the basis of a fellowship, came to Cornell, where I met my husband, and so ended up over here.
And so it all happened. Tell us a little bit about your father. I think he was a very special character, and I would love for people to know about him.
My father was a polylinguist, and he came to India as the cultural attaché for Austria, and he used the time to research early Tibetan philosophy. Mm-hmm. And he was the foremost scholar of the field, and in fact, it's not too much to say he put the field on the academic map.
You said that he spoke many languages, but how many would you count?
Well, let us say he did not speak any of the New World languages or African languages, but pretty much he knew or was able to use any of the Old World European and Asian languages, both ancient and modern.
Amazing. That's so amazing. And then what role did he play during World War II? I thought that was really interesting.
He was together with my mother, he was in the resistance, and that was the reason I was born outside of Vienna, because the month before I was born, the Nazis got on his track, and it got a little too hot for him in Vienna, and so we moved to my mother's ancestral village, and during a raid by the SS, the farmers actually hid him in one of their big ovens.
Amazing. And that's how he avoided being found.
Yes.
That is quite a story. I think that's very unique, and I'm very happy that you could share it with people. I think it's a very cool background. So when did you begin writing? How did you start that?
Well, in school, of course, and in an English school from the start, you first write little stories and then essays, and probably I wrote my first story independently when I was around 10.
Do you remember what it was about?
I believe it was about a gnome who was lazy, and so he got people to do his work for him. And
that sounds so cute. Were you trying to? Was it an example of somebody you knew in personal life?
Well, I wouldn't exclude that.
A fellow student, perhaps?
Or perhaps even myself.
Oh, I see.
I liked to trade writing essays for solutions to maths problems.
Aha! Yeah, I know. We tend to be either literary people or math people, so that is our duality. Okay, so then what is your favorite subject or genre to write in?
Probably the slightly fantastical, or rather where there is that intersection between what is reality and what is illusion.
So do you keep it to short stories only, or?
Yes.
And I've read your short story, at least the one that you gave me, and I really loved it.
Well, thank you.
It was very fairy tale like.
That's essentially the genre I like. And I suppose your next question is, what is my influence? And I would have to credit particularly the German Romantics, and in particular E.T.A. Hoffmann.
Could you extrapolate on that?
The German Romantics essentially specialized in this semi-fairy tale type of... It isn't technically a short story, it's called a novella. And there is that ambiguity between, is what the character perceives real or is it an illusion? And it has a very strong psychological overtones.
It definitely does. It sounds like almost deep and meaningful kind of questions about life.
It is. It is. And it's no accident that the early psychologists, from whether Freud or Jung, drew very, very heavily on the German Romantics as their example.
Well, I think there is that. I think a lot of... Eventually, they end up looking at myths in general and start kind of analyzing the myths that we have and the religions that we have and what do they actually mean on our subconscious level. So it makes sense. Okay, so is there a reason why you prefer writing short stories as opposed to novels or anything longer?
I like the discipline and the necessity for thought structure, and where every word counts.
It's almost like writing a poem, but in a longer form, more free.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, where everything has to be very specific. Okay, so I think the fact that you were a musicologist is very interesting. How and why did you begin to be a musicologist?
Well, particularly for the German Romantics, music was a very, very important intellectual question. In fact, they said music is the universal. It's a progressive universal art in which sums up everything. So in order to understand the writings of the German Romantics, both the theoretical and their fiction, because a number of the German Romantics were also literary theoreticians. One really has to have a knowledge of music. And my graduate school work focused primarily on the German Romantics.
That is interesting. It's like, well, it's a composition either with words or with notes. And so, yeah, it's very interesting. And there's obviously cadence involved in literature, even though, it's not an actual musical scale. Okay, and who then is your favorite composer, if you have one, and why? I know that's a difficult question to answer.
I would, of course, have to say the composer I'm just listening to. Probably, if I have to choose just one, it would be Schubert.
Schubert is awesome. Why would you say that?
His melodic inventiveness, but also that sense of wandering that comes through in his music. It's not... Sometimes he's accused of being formless. That's very far from the case. It's just a very fantastical form.
The fantastical keeps creeping up with you. Wonderful. Okay. And as far as languages go, you studied and know some great ones. Tell us which was... perhaps not the favorite, but the most fun to learn, or some of the language that you really like to read in.
Well, the two languages I use interchangeably are German and English. I learnt English at age 5 when we came to India, and by the end of the first year, there was really no difference between the two languages for me. In addition, of course, I learnt Hindi, and of course Latin and Greek, and some French, and I can read with a fair degree of comprehension Italian.
Which one do you feel like you could read more, or I guess you understand more when you read, Italian or French?
Possibly Italian, because of the Latin.
That's really interesting. Okay, great. I know you obviously have mentioned the German Romantics. Outside of that, is there any particular language you really like to read and that you feel is very gratifying?
Well, I love the Elizabethan poets.
Could you mention one?
Sir Philip Sidney, Christopher Marlowe, Walter Raleigh.
Okay, great. All right. And let's see. Is there any place where we could find your writing?
You can read some of my critical writing. I wrote the introduction to our anthology for four-hand romantic piano music, and some reviews I wrote for 18th century music, and for the rest it's in the drawer.
Well, I'm waiting for the day where you finally begin to publish them somewhere, because I want an anthology of your work that I could turn to. And you have such amazing stories. Like I've told you, the stories that you told me about your experiences in India, they scream short story, and I can't wait till you have them penned down.
Well, some of them are actually written.
Well, how come I haven't read them? How come these people don't have access to them? One day soon. She's blushing. You guys can't see her, but she's blushing. How are you enjoying learning the viol?
I love it. It's simultaneously frustrating and exhilarating.
Just like learn so many instruments, yeah. Okay, great. Well then, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm very honored that you joined me and that you told everybody a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm the one who should be honored.
Oh, but I think, I know this is going to maybe sound odd, but I really feel like both you and your husband are such treasures, and that there's so much that you guys could offer the world with your perspectives. So I'm glad that you guys could be on here.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. All righty, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me and tuning in. And I shall see you next time. Hey, lovely people. Thank you so much for tuning in to Unveil the Practice podcast. If you liked it and found value in the information offered, I would appreciate it so much if you could subscribe and leave a review to let others know how much you loved it. If you want to know more about my acupuncture business, please visit my website, unveilthepractice.com. If you'd like to know more about my writing, please visit my other website, victorianicola.com. Victoria spelled Viktoria. Nicola spelled Nikola. You can also find my poetry on my blog called bleedingwords.blog. I'm wishing you all a wonderful day, and I hope to see you tune in next time. Bye.